Okay, so last we spoke, I was on page 30, and we learned that witches do not have toes, which is kind of weird. I don't know how you balance. They're just big blocky feet that fit into their shoes. And so we learned that they don't wear comfy shoes. They jam their feet into little pretty shoes. And the grandmother was telling her how uncomfortable they must be. If she's wearing ordinary shoes, it won't help me recognize her, will it, Grandmama? I'm afraid it won't, my grandmother said. You might possibly see her limping very slightly, only if you keep watching her closely. Are those little differences then, Grandmama? There's one more, just one more. What is it, Grandmama? Their spit, spit. Their spit is blue. Ha! Their spit is blue. Blue? Not blue. Their spit can't be blue. Blue. It's blue. You don't mean it, Grandmama. Nobody can have blue spit. Witches can. Is it like ink? I asked. Exactly, she said. They even use it to write with. They use their old-fashioned pens. They have nibs, and they lick the nib, and you can notice the blue spit. Grandmama, if a witch was talking to me, wouldn't I be able to notice that? Only if you look very, very carefully, my grandmother said. If you look very, very carefully. Yeah. That's a cool one. Probably see a slight bluish tinge on her teeth, but it doesn't show very much. It would if she spat, I said. Witches never spit. My grandmother said they daren't. I couldn't believe my grandmother would be lying to me. She went to church every morning of the week, and she said grace at every single meal, and somebody who did that would never tell lies. I was beginning to believe every word that she said. So there you are, my grandmother said. That's all I can tell you. None of it is very helpful. You can still never be absolutely sure whether a woman is a witch, or not just by looking at her, but if she's wearing gloves, if she has a large nose hole, so the queer eyes and the hair that looks as though it might be a wig, and if she has bluish tinge to her teeth, if she has all of these things, then you can run like mad. Grandmama, when you were a little girl, did you ever meet a witch? Once, only once. What happened? I'm not going to tell you, she said. It would frighten you out of your skin and give you bad dreams. Oh, please tell me, I begged. No, certain things are too horrible to talk about. Does it have something to do with your missing thumb? I asked. Suddenly, her old wrinkled lips shut, as though a pair of tongs and the hand that held the cigar, which has no thumb on it, began to quiver very slightly. Quiver, shake. I waited. She didn't look at me. She didn't speak. All of a sudden, she had shut herself off completely. The conversation was finished. Good night, Grandmama, I said, rising from the floor and kissing her on the cheek. She didn't move. I crept out of the room and went to my bedroom. I kind of have to infer that something about the thumb might be that it happened because of a witch. Call me crazy. The Grand High Witch. High Witch. The next day, a man in a black suit arrived at the house carrying a briefcase, and he held a long conversation with my grandmother in the living room. I was not allowed in there while he was there, but when he went away, my grandmother came in to talk to me, walking very slowly and looking very sad. That man was reading me your father's will. What is a will? It is something you write before you die, she said, and in it, and in it, you say who is going to give sorry, I think I messed that up. In it, you say before you die, and it is you're going to have your money and your property. But most important of all, it is going to say who looks after your child. A fear of panic came over my eyes. Grandmama, I don't have to go somewhere else, do I? No, your father would never have done that. He asked me to take care of you for as long as I live, but he also asked that I take you back to his own house in England. He wants us to stay there. But why? Why can't we stay here in Norway? You would hate to live anywhere else. You told me you would, I know. But there are a lot of complications with money and with the house that you wouldn't understand. And it is said in your will that although your family is Norwegian, you were born in England, you have started your education there, and he wants you to continue your education in English schools. Oh, Grandmama, You don't want to go and live in an English house. I know you don't. Of course I don't, but I am afraid I must. The will says that your mother felt the same way about it, and it is important to respect the wishes of your parents. There was no way out of it. We had to go to England, and my grandmother started making arrangements at once. Your next school term begins in a few days, she said, so we don't have any time to waste. On the evening before we left for England, my grandmother got on with her favorite subject once again. There are not as many witches in England, she says, as there are in Norway. I'm sure I won't meet one, I said. I sincerely hope you won't. She said, because those English witches are probably the most vicious in the whole world. As she sat there smoking her foul cigar and talking away, I kept looking at the hand with the missing thumb. I couldn't help thinking about it. I was fascinated by it, and I kept wondering what awful thing had happened that time when she had met a witch. It must have been absolutely appalling and gruesome, otherwise she would have told me about it. Maybe the thumb had twisted off. Or perhaps she had been forced to jam her thumb, or perhaps down the spout of a boiling kettle until it was steamed away. Or did something... Oh my goodness, I'm having trouble reading today. Or did someone pull it out of her hand like a tooth? I couldn't help trying to guess. Tell me what those English witches do, Grandmama, I said. Well, she said, sucking away at her stinking cigar, the favorite ruse is to mix up a powder that will turn a child into some creature or other and that all grown-ups hate. What sort of creature? Often it's a slug. A slug is one of those favorites. Then the grown-ups step on the slug and they squish it without knowing that it's a child. That's perfectly beastly, I said. Or it might be a flea, my grandmother said. They might turn you into a flea, and without realizing what she was, doing your own mother would be getting into a flea, and then it's goodbye to you. You're making me nervous, Grandmama. I don't think I want to go back to England. I've known English witches, she went on, who have turned children into pheasants, and then sneaked the pheasant into the wood the very day that pheasant shooting began. Pheasants are birds, like a turkey or something like that. And ouch, I said. So they got shot? Of course they got shot. And then they became plucked and roasted and eaten for supper. I pictured myself as a pheasant, flying frantically over the men with the guns, swerving and dipping as the guns exploded below me. Yes, my grandmother said, it gives the English witches great pleasure to stand back and watch the grown-ups doing away with their own children. I really don't want to go back to England, I said. Nor do I, but I'm afraid we need to. Are witches different in every country? Oh, completely different, my grandmother said, but I don't know much about the other countries. Don't you even know about America? I asked. Not really, although I have heard that over there the witches are able to make the grown-ups eat their own children. Never, I cried. Oh no, Grandmama. That couldn't be true. I don't know whether it's true or not, she said. It's only a rumor I've heard. But how are they possibly making them eat their own children? Oh, by turning them into hot dogs, of course. That wouldn't be too difficult for a clever witch. Does every single country in the world have its own witches? Whenever you find people, you find witches, she said. There is a secret society of witches in every single country. And do they all know one another, Grandmother? No, they do not. A witch only knows the witch in her own country. She is strictly forbidden to communicate with any foreign witches, but an English witch, for example, will know all the other witches in England. They are all friends. They ring each other up. They drop deadly recipes. Goodness knows what else they talk about. I hate to think. I sat on the floor watching my grandmother. She put her cigar stubs in the ashtray and folded her hands across her stomach. Once a year, she said, the witches of each separate country hold their own secret meeting. They all get together in one place to receive a lecture from the grand high witch of all the world. From who? I cried. She's the ruler of them all, my grandmother said. She is all-powerful. She's without mercy. All other witches are petrified of her. They see her only once a year at their annual meeting. She goes there to whip up excitement and enthusiasm and give orders. The Grand High Witch travels from the country to country attending these annual meetings. Where do they have these annual meetings, grandmother? There are all sorts of rumors, my grandmother answered. I haven't heard it said that they just book a hotel like any other group of women were holding a meeting. I have also heard it said that they have some very peculiar things that go on in hotels they stay in. It is rumored that the beds are never slept in, that there are burn marks on the bedroom carpets, that toads are discovered in bathtubs, and that down in the kitchen, the cook once found a baby crocodile swimming in a saucepan of soup. My grandmother picked up the cigar and took another puff, inhaling the foul smoke deeply into her lungs. Where does the Grand High Witch live when she's at home? I asked. Nobody knows, my grandmother said. If we knew that, then she would be rooted out and destroyed. Witchophiles all over the world have spent their lives trying to discover the secret headquarters of the Grand High Witch. What is a witchophile, Grandmama? A person who studies witches and knows a lot about them, my grandmother said. Are you a witchophile, Grandmama? I am a retired witchophile. She said, I am too old to be active any longer, but when I was younger, I traveled all over the globe trying to track down the Grand High Witch. I never even came close to succeeding. Is she rich? Oh, she's rolling, my grandmother said, simply rolling in money. Rumor has it that there is a machine in the headquarters, which is exactly like the machine the government uses to print the blank notes that you and I use. Money. Blank notes. After all, blank notes are only bits of paper with special designs and pictures on them. Anyone can make them who has the right machine and the right paper. My guess is that the Grand High Witch makes all the money she wants, and she dishes it out to witches everywhere. What about foreign money? I asked. Those machines can make Chinese money if they want to. It's only a question of pressing the right button. But Grandmama, I said, if nobody has seen the Grand High Witch, how can you be so sure that she exists? The next morning we sailed for England, and soon I was back in the old family house in Kent, but this time with only my grandmother to look after me. Then the Easter term began, and every weekend I went to school, and everything seemed to have come back to normal again. Now, at the bottom of our garden, there was an enormous conker tree, and high up in its branches, Timmy, my best friend, and I had started to build a magnificent tree house. We were able to work on it only on the weekends, but we were getting along fine. We had begun with the floor, which we built by laying wide planks between two quite far apart branches and nailing them down. Within a month, we had finished the floor. Then we constructed a wooden railing around the floor, and that left only the roof to be built. The roof was a difficult bit. One Saturday afternoon, when Timmy was in bed with the flu, I decided to make a start on the roof all by myself. It was lovely being high up there in the conker tree all alone with the pale young leaves coming out from everywhere around me. It was like being in a green cave, and the height made it extra exciting. My grandmother had told me that if I fell, I would break a leg, and every time I looked down, I got a tingle along my spine. I worked away, nailing the first plank on the roof, and suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a woman standing immediately below me. She was looking up at me and smiling in the most peculiar way. When most people smile, their lips go out sideways. This woman's lips went upwards and downwards, showing all of her front teeth and gums. The gums were like raw meat. Ugh. It is always a shock to discover that you are being watched when you think you are alone. And what is this strange woman doing in our garden anyway? I noticed that she was wearing a small black hat, and she had black gloves on her hands, and the gloves came nearly to her elbows. Gloves, I said. She was wearing gloves. I froze all over. I have a present for you, she said, still staring at me, still smiling, still showing her teeth and gums. I didn't answer. Come down out of the tree, little boy, she said. and I shall give you the most exciting present that you have ever had. Her voice had a curious rasping quality. It made a sort of metallic sound, like metal, as though her throat were full of drawing pins. Without taking my eyes from her face, she very slowly put one of those gloved hands into her purse and drew out a small green snake. She held it up for me to see. "It's tame," she said. The snake began to coil around her forearm, and it was brilliant green. "If you come down here, I shall give it to you." "Oh, Grandmama," I thought, "come and help me." Then I panicked. I dropped the hammer and shot up that enormous tree like a monkey. I didn't stop until I was high as I possibly could go, and there I stayed, quivering with fear. I couldn't see the woman now. There were layers and layers and layers of leaves between me and her. I stayed up there for hours. I kept very still. It began to grow dark. Oops. Hold on. It began to grow dark. At last I heard my grandmother calling my name. "I'm up here. Come down at once," she called. "It's past your bed supper time." "Grandmama, has that woman gone?" "What woman?" She shouted. "The woman in the black gloves." There was silence from below. It was silent. If anybody was too stunned to speak. "Grandmama," I shouted, "has she gone?" "Yes," my grandmother answered at last. "She's gone. I'm here, my darling. I will look after you. You can come down now." I climbed down. I was trembling. My grandmother enfolded me in her arms. "I have seen a witch," I said. "Come inside," she said. "You will be all right with me." She led me into the house and gave me a cup of hot cocoa with lots of sugar. "Tell me everything," I told her. By the time I was finished, it was my grandmother who was trembling. Her face was ashy gray, and I saw her glance down at the hand of hers, and she didn't have a thumb. You know what this means? It means that there is one of them in our district. From now on, I'm not letting you walk to school alone. Do you think she could be after me, specifically? No. I doubt that. One child is as good as any other of her creatures. It is hardly surprising that after that I became a very witch-conscious little boy. If I happened to be alone on the road and saw a woman approaching who was wearing gloves, I would quickly skip across to the other side, and as the weather remained pretty cold during the whole of the month, nearly everybody was wearing gloves. Curiously enough, I never saw the woman with the green snake again. That was my first witch, but it wasn't my last. So this is a picture of her. Okay, guys. Till next time.